Have you ever heard something in the dark that you knew wasn't an animal, and wasn't human either? I'd lived my whole life in the Appalachian Mountains, so I thought I knew every sound these hills could make. But one night, I stepped outside to lock my workshop, and the woods went dead silent. No wind, no crickets, just the sound of my dog growling like his life depended on it. Then, something moved. Big, heavy, circling, and the whispers started. Low, tangled voices that slid through the air like they were inside my head. I never felt fear like that before. And the truly terrifying question, what do you think was out there in the dark? Tonight, we're diving into true Appalachian Mountains horror stories that actually happened. So stick close and keep watching till the end to find out what happened before it was too late. But before we start, make sure to subscribe or follow so you never miss any new chilling releases. If you're enjoying the content, hit like, drop a comment, and share this video. Let's see how many of you truly love this kind of episodes. Now here's your challenge. One of the stories you're about to hear might not be real. It could be completely made up. Or maybe all of them are true. Watch till the end. Try to spot the fake, and leave your guess in the comments. And as for last episode's fake story, they were all true. Thank you for being part of this journey with me. And now, let's dive into the darkness together. I've spent my whole life tucked into the Appalachian Mountains. Out here, you grow up with certain expectations about nighttime sounds. Coyotes yipping somewhere far off, maybe the occasional bear nosing around the compost heap, a raccoon clattering across the porch. Nothing that really shakes you once you've lived in these hills long enough. That's why this night still sticks in my ribs. It was a perfectly ordinary evening to start with. I'd done my usual chores, ate a late dinner, and was nursing a cup of coffee while my old retriever, Jax, slept by the fireplace. He's about as calm as dogs get. Mailman? He might bark once. Thunderstorm? He doesn't even lift his head. That's why I nearly spilled my coffee when a low, deep growl rolled out of him. I turned to see him standing stiff as a board. Every hair along his back bristled, eyes locked on the front window. I glanced outside, but all I caught was my own reflection in the glass. I muttered something to him. Easy, boy. Trying to brush it off, but inside I was rattled. I've never seen him that wound up. Then I remembered. The workshop. It's down the slope behind the house, maybe 50 yards away. I'd forgotten to lock it earlier. Normally, that's just a quick trip with a flashlight. But with Jax acting like that, my skin was already crawling. Still, I didn't want to leave it unsecured all night. So I pulled on my coat, grabbed the flashlight, and stepped outside. Jax came right with me, glued to my leg, ears twitching at every shift in the dark. The air felt off. Not cold exactly, just still in a way that made me notice it. No crickets, no wind in the trees. Just the crunch of my boots in the frost-bitten grass. Halfway down, Jax growled again. This time deeper, more urgent. That's when I noticed the workshop door hanging open a few inches. I knew I'd shut it. My stomach knotted, but I made myself walk the rest of the way, nudged it shut, and turned the key. That's when the forest behind me exploded. It wasn't just one animal. It was like an army crashed through the undergrowth. Branches snapping, leaves scattering, the sound of weight pounding across frozen earth. Jax pressed against my legs so hard I nearly lost my balance. The sound was too big to be deer, too heavy for coyotes. My hands shook so bad I fumbled the flashlight. I backed toward the house, forcing myself not to run, but every muscle in my legs was screaming to bolt. The closer we got to the porch, the more frantic I felt. I shoved the door shut, threw the deadbolt, and stood there breathing like I just sprinted a mile. I tried telling myself it could have been a herd of deer spooked by something, but in my gut, I knew it wasn't. I grabbed my pistol from upstairs. I've never felt the need to hold a gun in my own house before, but that night, I did. Jax barked. One sharp, warning bark that he only uses when something's dead wrong. Against my better judgment, I stepped back out onto the porch, flashlight and pistol in hand. The yard was still, the tree line unmoving. Then I heard it. A murmur. Not a single voice. More like a low, tangled mess of whispers, just at the edge of my property. It wasn't English, but it wasn't random noise either. Jax whimpered, tail tucked, staring at the woods, like his eyes couldn't keep up with whatever was moving out there. The sound shifted. One moment off to the left, then suddenly behind me, then across the yard, like it was circling. My skin prickled so hard I thought it might tear. I swept the flashlight beam back and forth, but there was nothing. A wave of nausea hit me out of nowhere, heavy and sickening. I forced myself inside and locked the door. The murmuring didn't stop. It was softer through the walls, but constant, like someone whispering in the next room. Every time I moved, even just shifting a curtain, it went dead silent, as if whatever was out there could hear every breath. Then it would start again, closer. The hours dragged. I kept the lights off. I sat with my back against the wall, pistol in my lap, jotting down the times I heard footsteps on the gravel outside. The steps came in singles. One slow crunch, a pause, another, like whoever, or whatever was out there, wanted me to know it was moving. Around 4:30, the tone of the murmuring changed. Lower, harsher. Then it started to drift away. I heard movement in the brush, twigs breaking, and finally, the first frog croak I'd heard all night. It was like the woods themselves had been holding their breath until that moment. When dawn came, I stepped onto the porch. My yard was littered with broken branches. The ground smelled churned up, like something had been rooting around. But there were no footprints, nothing that could prove what happened. Jax didn't relax until the sunlight hit the tree line. I just stood there feeling the weight of the night settle into my bones. I don't know what I heard. I don't know if I want to. But I do know this. Some things out here aren't animals, and they aren't people. There's something else. And once they find you, they don't forget. I've spent my entire life in Southwest Virginia, close to the Blue Ridge, and I've hiked these mountains since I was old enough to follow my dad down a trail. Over the years, I've learned every sound and smell the woods can make. I've come across just about every kind of wildlife we have here. Black bears, coyotes, bobcats, even a mountain lion once in the distance. I know the difference between the shadow of a deer in fog and something that's not supposed to be there. That's why last October sticks with me. I'd taken a few days off work before the weather turned to real winter. The plan was to do a solo hike and camp for 2 nights, somewhere quiet where I wouldn't run into anyone. I'd been eyeing a particular stretch of trail for a while, a spur off the Appalachian Trail that winds toward an area locals call Devil's Spine. It's not marked on official maps under that name, but if you ask around at the feed store or diner, people know it. Some just say it's a nasty ridge to cross because of the steep drop-offs. Others will lower their voices and tell you about weird things seen in the fog. I don't believe in ghost stories, but I do believe in respecting the mountains. Bad weather, unstable ground, wild animals, those can kill you without a hint of the supernatural. I pack accordingly. Tent, sleeping bag, water filter, extra food, first aid kit, GPS, map, compass, and bear spray. Enough to handle myself if things went wrong. The first day was gorgeous. Crisp air, dry ground, and the trees just past peak color. Rusty oranges, deep reds, and gold. The trail was rougher than I remembered, with overgrown brush closing in at points, but I was making good time. By early evening, I was about a mile past where most people turn around. My plan was to reach a small clearing near a spring and camp there. That's when the light changed. On one side of the ridge, the forest had dropped into this cold blue shadow. On the other, the sunset was bleeding through a bank of low fog, painting everything in a strange pink-red haze. I stopped to take a sip of water and just stared at it for a while. It didn't look real, more like a scene from a movie than something you stumble into on a Tuesday. Then I noticed the silence. Out here, there's always something making noise. A bird call, wind in the leaves, a squirrel rustling through the undergrowth. But the woods had gone completely still. My footsteps sounded unnaturally muffled, like the ground itself was swallowing the sound. I actually caught myself holding my breath without realizing it. About 30 yards ahead, something stood just off the trail. At first, I thought it was a deer. The antler shapes were there, branching silhouettes against the fog. But the height was wrong. It was standing upright, not hunched or leaning, and it didn't move the way deer do when they spot you. It was still. I slowed my pace, my hand going to the bear spray clipped to my hip. My eyes kept flicking between the antlers and the body. The shape was wrong, tall, thin, and unmoving. The fog made it impossible to make out detail, but I could see enough to know it wasn't just a fallen tree or trick of the light. We just stood there, staring at each other. My gut told me not to speak, not to call out. It wasn't fear exactly, more like the heavy stillness you get when something's deciding whether you're a threat or prey. Then, from somewhere to my left, maybe 50 yards into the trees, came a sound I will never forget. It was low, drawn out, and deep enough that I felt it in my chest more than I heard it with my ears. It wasn't a bear's huff, and it wasn't a deer's grunt. I've heard elk bugle, and it wasn't that either. It was like a groan with a hum under it, almost mechanical in tone, but not entirely unnatural either. The figure's head turned sharply toward the sound, quick and precise, like the snap of a bird's attention, and that was enough to break me out of my trance. I started walking fast down the trail, my eyes darting between the path ahead and the fog behind me. The strange thing was, the trail felt longer. I know that sounds crazy, but I just hiked it on the way in, and now it felt like the switchbacks stretched on forever. The fog thickened with every turn, wrapping the trees so tightly that I couldn't see more than 20 feet in any direction. I didn't hear it following me, but I couldn't shake the feeling I wasn't alone. Every so often, a shadow would move at the edge of my vision, but when I looked straight at it, there was nothing there but mist and trees. By the time I reached the clearing where I'd planned to set up camp, my mind was already made up. I wasn't staying out there that night. I pushed straight through, hiking the remaining miles back to the parking lot. The last stretch was in full dark, my headlamp barely cutting through the fog. When my boots finally hit gravel, I almost laughed from relief. I threw my pack in the bed of my truck and sat in the driver's seat with the doors locked for a few minutes before starting the engine. I just watched the tree line, half expecting to see those antlers or that still silhouette standing in the glow of my taillights. I've gone back to Devil's Spine since, but never past that ridge where the light splits. I'm not saying it was a ghost or a monster. It could have been a person in camo, maybe with a deer skull, playing some twisted joke. It could have been an elk, though we don't see many around here. But I know this. Whatever it was, it stood in complete silence. It didn't move like a man, and the air around it felt heavier than anything I've experienced in the woods before. And that's enough to keep me from finding out more. Two summers ago, I decided to get away for a weekend and go solo camping at a national park outside Roanoke. I'd been there before and had a favorite spot, tucked near a shallow creek, flat ground, good shade, a little stone fire ring. Private enough that you didn't see other people unless you wanted to, but not so far off that you felt stranded. The drive took about 4 hours on winding roads, the trees getting taller and denser the further I went. By the time I parked in the gravel lot, the air was clean and heavy with that mossy, woodsy smell. I hiked the last quarter mile in, stepping over roots and little stones, and set up camp. My tent was a small two-person I could pitch in my sleep. Sleeping bag rolled out, gear stacked inside, food bag hung high in a tree. Everything felt like it always did when I camped there. Quiet, calm, predictable. For most of the afternoon, the only sounds were the creek trickling and the breeze rattling the leaves. I boiled water, ate a freeze-dried dinner, and stretched out next to the fire ring with a book. No phone service, no notifications, just the woods. It was late afternoon when I noticed it. Faint music, drifting in from somewhere beyond the trees. Not loud, not close, just far enough away that it almost blended into the wind and the water. The tune was country, old style, the recording crackly like it was playing from an ancient vinyl or battered tape. At first, I didn't think much of it. Other campers sometimes broke the no amplified music rule. Annoying, but not uncommon. But after a while, I realized the song wasn't changing. It would end, pause for a few seconds, then start from the beginning again. Same lyrics, same rhythm, same twangy voice on repeat. An hour later, it was starting to grate on me. I walked down to the creek, splashed water on my face, even made a slow loop around my little clearing just to see if I could spot whoever was playing it. Nothing. Just more trees, and more of that song, always from the same vague direction, though sometimes the wind made it fade in and out. Finally, as the sun dipped lower, I decided to track it down. If it was someone's forgotten radio, I'd turn it off. If it was an actual person, maybe I could convince them to cut it out. I strapped on my headlamp, tightened my boots, and started walking toward the sound. The deeper I went, the thicker the undergrowth became. No trail, just soft moss, roots, and low branches snagging my sleeves. Every few minutes I'd stop, listening, trying to pinpoint where the music was coming from. It never got much louder. It just stayed there, always a little out of reach. Nearly a mile in, I finally spotted a faint orange glow through the trees. As I got closer, the song became clearer. The lyrics sounded like something about going home, though the static muddied the words. It wasn't another campsite. It was an old, beat-up portable radio duct-taped to a tree trunk. Below it sat a car battery wedged between two roots, hidden under a loose layer of leaves. Thick, dirty jumper cables ran from the battery up to the radio. No tent, no chairs, no cooler. Just the radio, the battery, and the looped song. The ground around it was scuffed, but there were no fresh footprints that I could see. I stood there for a minute, scanning the shadows. Nothing moved. I switched the radio off, and the silence that followed felt heavier than before. I turned and headed back, following my own scuff marks and the faint sound of the creek to guide me. But the walk back felt longer, the brush thicker. Twice I stopped, convinced I'd heard a branch snap somewhere behind me. But when I turned, there was nothing but shadow and leaves. When I got back to my camp, my stomach sank. My first aid kit was gone from the picnic table. My folding knife, the one I'd used earlier to cut paracord, was missing too. The backup flashlight I always kept in my tent pocket had vanished. My sleeping bag was unzipped, and my food bag had been tugged halfway down from its branch, though none of the food was taken. It looked like someone had come through, touched everything, and left only what they didn't care about. No tracks, no trash, just absence. I built up the fire and sat watching the tree line, my ears tuned to the smallest rustle. When the music started again, my chest tightened. It was the same song, but now much closer. I put out the fire, stuffed what I could into my pack, and left behind anything that took too long to carry. My headlamp beam shook as I walked. The music faded in and out, and sometimes it sounded like it was moving. Half a mile from camp, the trail curved through thick brush, and there was my missing gear, laid out neatly on the dirt. My first aid kit was opened, every item lined up in perfect spacing. My knife and flashlight were set on either side, blades out, pointing away from the kit. There were boot prints in the mud. The music was closer. Branches snapped somewhere to my right. I left everything and ran, cutting off the trail, ducking under low pines, forcing my way uphill through scrub and deadfall. I kept hearing movement just behind me. Never too close, but never far. Hours later, I stumbled into the parking lot just as dawn was breaking. I locked my car doors before even sitting down, gripping the steering wheel with shaking hands. At the ranger station, I told them what happened. The ranger didn't look surprised. He said there'd been a string of distraction thefts in the area. Radios, fake campfires, even animal calls to lure campers away. Sometimes, he said, the thieves would put the stolen items back in strange arrangements just to unnerve people. I haven't been back since. It's not losing the gear that sticks with me. It's knowing that whoever it was stayed close enough to watch me for hours, hidden in the dark, deciding when to let me hear them. If you've made it to the end of this video, let me know in the comments which story creeped you out the most, and if you could survive only one of them, which one would it be? Don't forget to drop your guess. Which story do you think was the fake one? Also, if you enjoyed the episode, hit super thanks if you're on YouTube, or send us some stars if you're on Facebook to show some love and make your comments stand out. Want to go next level? Get early access to upcoming episodes, exclusive members-only content, and much more by joining our YouTube membership or becoming a Patreon supporter. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's waiting there for you. Don't forget to like, share, and catch up on our previous episodes. And now, stay tuned for the next horror episode.